Hey, welcome in to the Fantasy Football Universe. Sorry, I spilled some soda on my my laptop here, so we're trying to clean up as we were talking right now. But it's Week 18 Roundtable. We moved it up from Saturday because we're like, we ain't got nothing else going on. I know we have ranking coming out, but like, let's be real. I don't know how many people are playing in Week 18, so we're kind of, we're having a little bit of fun. So it's myself, hashtag Dynasty Offseason Time to Shine, and the other guy that's been here for the long haul with myself, Jeremy Schulman, hashtag QB Mageddon. How you doing, Jeremy?
Yeah, man, hanging in. New year, new me, or some bullshit like that. It's January 3rd, and here we are. Same old background, same old bullshit here on the FFU. But we're going to talk a little bit of dynasty rankings and how you should value these guys compared to the market. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the better players from this season. So half recap, half look ahead. And over the next week or two, we're going to be sure to give you our Fantasy Football 2024 awards. We're going to be sure to give you, information on what's happening in the off season with us, as we have a lot of things planned. And then I think we'll take a break. I need to sleep. I slept like 17 hours last night. It was ridiculous. But tis the season to be resting, at least for now, until we jump into the stuff. But we're not going anywhere. We'll be here all off season long, more or less.
Yeah, we're like Jeremy's kind of hinting at us. Like we're gonna shift content a little bit and focus on things more like obviously rookies, dynasty content. So you all know what that means. If you play dynasty, you know what we're gonna focus on. But we're gonna shift away from the traditional stuff we're doing. See what works, see what doesn't. Jeremy's got a fun project he's working on. I don't want to spoil it. I will let him talk about it if he wants to. But yeah, we're just moving things around. We're shaking. We are, like to your point, like we're going to be here for a long time. We're not going anywhere. We might be on different channels doing different things, but we're still going to be coming back to FFU because this is our baby. We're trying to grow it. We got over our goal of 500 subscribers this year, so that was a nice little bonus. Now we're hoping to hit 1,000. So we're hoping to hit 1,000 by the start of next season. We will see how that goes. Will we get there? I hope so. Will it happen? I have no idea, right? So
we'll see. Hey, we'll see. Why not? At least we're having fun, right?
Yeah, we're like two crazy guys, just fun loving, freewheeling, all that fun stuff. So, shall we get? Do you want to start out with Dynasty, or what do you want to do? The FFU, kind of talk about the awards. Where are you leading, and we can go from there.
Yeah, why don't we get a little bit into? I guess we should probably do the past. Instead of handling the ghosts of 2025 future. So we should talk a little bit about these awards. We have our big award show coming up next week. We wanted to wait until the season officially ended, even though the fantasy season's over for most of us. We're not going to spoil any of those, but we have a few players who kind of narrowly missed the cut for some of our awards who we want to discuss. And I think, Jesse, there's real discussion that needs to be had about fantasy MVP. I know you see the names that we all have listed there. Aside from those names, who do you have as almost fantasy MVP for you?
Well, so the way I'll kind of give you guys a little bit. The way I broke it down is by the guy who had the most valuable over his other players in his position. Yep. So if anybody pays attention to war, they know what my answer is going to be, but I'm not going to say that because I'm going to add a little bit of context to it. But for me, it's like the quarterbacks, because there were some really good quarterbacks. For me, like the Baker Mayfields, the Jared Goffs, they fall a little short, but they were in the discussion because of where you got them and how valuable they were to your teams, right? So that kind of thing, obviously. And then there's the talented rookies, like we get into the Brian Thomas, the Jaden Daniels, those guys of the world too. So those guys were really close, but it's like they just didn't get all the way there. And then he gets into the Brock Bowers of the world, almost made it, but they might be in other categories, but not in MVP because there could only be one, right? It's Highlanders, there could only be one. So that's what we're going for. So I liked a lot of those guys, and it was hard to narrow it down because when you think of this fantasy season, I think the guy that stands out the most is Saquon Barkley for a lot of people.
Sure.
When he's the guy that we talked about it. We're like, oh, you should probably not draft him in the first round. That's probably a bad idea. Yeah. We're a bunch of idiots. Maybe don't listen to us on one, right? yeah, exactly. So it's interesting, but just based on how the other positions did, because you got Derrick Henry's, you have a lot of good players in that position. So that's not necessarily where it went, but for me, those guys all kind of stood out. So there was probably, I would say, about 10 guys I took seriously for that, and I was going back and forth. And really, when I reflect back on the season, who stands out the most? The way I look at it, how about for you? Who's the kind of guys you're thinking about that almost made the cut?
I will give away that I did pick a quarterback, but because I play in a lot of super flex leagues, Quarterback tends to be most important. It's at least half of the first round, and in startup drafts, it's the guys who command the most amount of capital. Trade. And I did pick the guy I wanted to pick, Jesse, and the guy I wanted to pick is, Samuel Darnold. Sam Darnold, because he was free, I just grabbed him off of waiver wire in about a third of my leagues, headed into, maybe June, July time. Just in the offseason, just grab him. He's out there, see what happens. Of course, we didn't expect J.J. McCarthy to go down with injury. There was always the potential that Sam Darnold was going to win this job. Because of injury, he did end up getting the job, but he may never let go of this job in Minnesota. If nothing else, he had an amazing season. I'll pull up the numbers on him in a second in terms of what he was able to do from a fantasy perspective. But Sam Darnold has earned himself a contract with an NFL team as the starter. We don't know which team that will be. If it's Minnesota, I am holding on to him for dear life as like a Brock Purdy-esque player because of Kevin O'Connell, the coach, who should be the coach of the year, I think, in my estimation, with what he's done with that Minnesota team. And then, of course, if he goes somewhere else and commands a big payday, I'm going to sell the crap out of Sam Darnold and get myself a first plus because of whatever hype it is that he's going into with one of the biggest quarterback contracts. I don't think he's going to go, top 6 contract wise, but because of the way that these contracts keep rising year over year, it's going to be close to top 10 money, and it won't be after that, right? It's going to be a steal in a few years. Do I think Sam Darnold's going to be a great NFL quarterback? I don't know, but I'm willing to take the chance on him in Minnesota. I am willing to sell the crap out of him if he goes anywhere else. But Sam Darnold on the season, that season ADP, I'm just looking at his stats. This is in 4-point passing touchdown. He was the QB 8 on the season. 35 passing touchdowns, 4,153 yards, added 200 rushing yards and a score on the ground. He was dominant for your fantasy purposes, and Sam Darnold was damn near a league winner for you if you had him as a QB2. And I really wanted him to be my MVP, but I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, like it's if you get into like the value perspective, like where you drafted certain guys, that's going to bring guys like Darnold. It's going to bring Bucky Irving. It's going to bring these other guys into the discussion, right? And I think they have valid cases if you want to play the value game, like where you took him. Like Darnold in like redraft 1 QB leagues, nobody drafted him. Like he was free.
Correct.
He was chilling there, like, right? Then we got the information of the J.J. McCarthy news injury. And it's like, maybe he's interesting. Maybe you had a bad quarterback situation. Maybe you'll do the Richardson, you pick him up. Yeah. But Hans is like, it works out brilliantly for you, right? Like my whole thought process is on him is his dynasty market's going to shift heavily one way or the other. Yeah. And I know we've talked about like maybe Minnesota does sign him and then they trade freaking J.J. McCarthy, right? Like that's entirely possible because that offsets the loss of you signing Darnold instead of letting him go. You get the comp picks and all these fun things. Like you can get all this fun stuff with it, right? But to your point that everything's perfect in Minnesota. I don't think you can find anything close to that outside Minnesota because there's no other place that matches that, right? So if he goes, and you know how I feel about Darnold, I think there's still a lot of like risk. And they've done an incredible job of hiding all of his like flaws as a quarterback, but he's also played really well. I'm not going to be like, oh, he's bad. No, he's played really well in the situation. Situation's excellent. You put two things together. This is how you get a top 8 quarterback in fantasy, right? That's how you do it. So yeah, I think he's right there along with it. It's just I think with like quarterback particularly, there was a lot of really good quarterbacks. So it's really hard for me to pick any quarterback. So newsflash, I didn't pick quarterback for my MVP. I'm just not going to say who I picked. I think you can make the case of a lot of those guys because they're so very like his top 6, maybe like if you want to throw Darnold there, you can say like top 8 quarterbacks, right? All fantastic. If you had those guys, a few of them where you drafted like Mayfield or Goff, like we talk about, or Darnold, it's all kind of similar. Those 3 guys are very similar in what they did for you, how they performed, all of those things. And then you get into the Josh Allen, the Lamar Jackson, the Jalen Daniels, and that basically rounds it out. I might be missing somebody. Jalen Hurts, of course. Of course, the guy that gets like a million touchdown impressions. But yeah, like the quarterback position is just it was really strong at the top. It fell off a cliff, and then we have obviously the other guy I was missing is the guy that probably people are going to make the case for comeback player of the year. Joe Burrow. I think he'll probably end up winning that, that title or whatever it is in the NFL. But yeah, if you had any of those quarterbacks, you're set. Once you got outside of there, is like you were living rough. So I think you could make the case if you want to do a quarterback. I just think it's another position for MVP for myself at least. Yeah. For like, I guess we can kind of get into a few of these other ones. Because there were so many good, I guess we'll talk about single game performance or worst single game performance, or what you want to do. For me and how I kind of did that is just went through who's the guys that had the monster performances. The worst one, actually, what I went about picking is the worst performance I picked based on playoffs. Like I included playoffs in that because I was like, they're so impactful. With a few of these guys, so that kind of gives you, and we're looking at each other's answers right now, so we can tell you, right, exactly right. So, a few of these guys, and I'll say it's a co-award for me, and I'll just say it was between James Conner and Terry McLaurin. I'm not going to tell you who I picked. I will have an answer to it, but they bombed in the playoffs for you, and were a disaster. So, when I was looking at that, just like the fact they were so heavily started, they were both of them 60% started in leagues. Everybody was playing them that had them. You threw them in your roster, they just kill teams across the board. Unless you had a bye week, and if you had a bye week, congrats, you did. But the majority of people that had them probably didn't have a bye week. So it's like, all right, we're going to take your season, go from there. For you, for kind of like best single game performance or worst single game performance, what was kind of the differentiating factor for you on those?
Well, like you said, it definitely has to do, and I got to find this guy is so far down. It definitely has to do with your performance in the playoffs. This is when you needed these guys most. It's one thing to get you there. And there's a lot to be said for that. But for example, if you had Jonathan Taylor, then you and you made the playoffs, you had a high probability of winning your league. Jonathan Taylor's not my pick, so we're not going to talk about that. But in terms of guys who I wanted to put worst performance, but I didn't, Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon in the playoffs was RB 32, 33, and 35 in weeks 15, 16, 17. Miami, KC, and Baltimore, so difficult matchups. But we know he was dealing with injury there, but he was coming off of a bye. You thought that he was going to be ready to go, and that Houston team absolutely just cannibalized itself and became a shell of whatever it was. And they're still, going to make the playoffs, or already in the playoffs pretty much. It's just a disaster there in Houston with what's going on. He's actually salvaged his week 15 performance by going 5 for 33 through the air.
So bad.
And still only finished as RB 32. So I'm looking at the numbers now, 12, 14, and 9 carries. Didn't even break 100 yards in those 3 matchups. No touchdowns. So Joe Mixon absolutely nuked you. He nuked 1 or 2 of my fantasy teams because I was going in as the front runner, and Mixon absolutely bombed. If I can do some quick math here, 4, 5, 6, 7,
it was
8,
rough.
11 touchdowns on the ground and no touchdowns in the fantasy postseason.
Yeah, that's the whole CJ Stroud aspect where he's up for discussion of biggest bust of the year, where he was drafted, because where people took him, and we talked about this, like people had him as QB1 in dynasty going into the year. And then he was top 7 pick, top 8 pick, top quarterbacks, right? He was just a disaster. And that offense, outside of Nico Collins and Joe Mixon, were the 2 staples. Nico was fine in the playoffs. Joe Mixon just Joe Mixon was like, hey, take Dell's out. I'm going with him. So he left with him. So it was a nightmare in Houston. It did not go well. Now they could turn around the playoffs and get better. People could love, CJ Stroud and all that. I think given his dynasty price, still top 7 quarterback. I have concerns about that price. I'm still probably selling at that price. So I would move him down a little bit. But yeah, since we're a dynasty mode, it's I could talk about those things. But yeah, that whole Houston situation, how good and excited we were about it, did not live up anywhere near that, right? Because they have Steph Diggs, he goes out, Tank Dell's dealing with injury, he finally comes on, looks good, and then just gets his leg blown out, obliterated, and you're just like, and they just continued to run it through Joe Mixon, even though it wasn't super efficient. It was great for fantasy, but not good for NFL play. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm assuming Slowick probably goes, if they change it up, and we'll see what happens next year. So yeah, I don't know how to value the Houston situation. It's interesting. If we can get a dip on it, I'll have some interest in Stroud, but I just think people are going to hold on to that rookie season. They're just going to keep probably up. So Stroud's definitely in the discussion for biggest bust across fantasy this year, if you ask me.
Yeah, there's 2 interesting things there. I don't know if this is necessarily a Bobby Slowick problem, but he certainly should have tried to do a little bit more to figure it out and address it, other than give Joe Mixon a ridiculous amount of carries. The biggest issue on this team was the offensive line. I know they dealt with some injury, but certainly that offensive line wasn't good enough to start the season. They really need to invest in that in the off season. But the problem is now, with Diggs aging and injured, Tank Dell probably not playing at all in 2025. They need weapons, right? Joe Mixon, older, so and really tailed off. So they all of a sudden need everything on offense and outside of wide receiver one and quarterback. So it's really not the ideal situation for them headed into the offseason. But if they can do something like get a high profile free agent, either at running back or wide receiver or both, and get something in the draft and then try to fortify that offensive line, they have a chance. But damn, it's really, Houston's down bad right now.
Yeah, you're seeing, like, if you just look at like pressure, like under 2.5 seconds throwing, like Burrow and Stroud were on a ton of pressure. Just Burrow was elevating what they were doing offensively. Stroud just wasn't able to do that. Now it's the second year. A lot of times we get these quarterbacks and, year two regressions. It happens. He's still a good NFL quarterback. I wouldn't say he's bad. It's just we want to see him progress and be that franchise level elite potential MVP quarterback, because the AFC's stacked with quarterbacks. Like that's the thing. Like you look across that position, and it's just like, how are you going to separate yourself? Now their division sucks. That's the one good thing he has going for him. It's like Richardson's not living up to it. Trevor Lawrence, another disappointing asset right there. That just hold that division. It's like it's Stroud's for the taking if they take it. I don't know if they're going to, but it's sure set up nicely for them. So hopefully they figure out, they revamp the offensive line. They move away from these 1st and 10 runs that they do all the time. Mix it up, please, for the love of God.
Yeah.
And we move there. We could be looking next time and being like, wow, Stroud was a good value, and it's entirely possible. So I'm curious to see how that all shifts out.
Yeah, totally agree. I have a question for you. We'll get into all these different positions later, but I think the tight end position continues to be an enigma. So we should talk about that for a second.
Yes.
It solidified itself a little bit at the top, so we know who we're not kind of naming. But in terms of some of the best tight ends of the season, I was surprised not to see your guy, our guy, eventually Trey McBride on our list. It's probably just because he only had one receiving touchdown on the year, but a massive, massive season for Trey McBride, and he deserves at least some recognition now for what he was able to do during the season.
Yeah, he was my dynasty tight end one coming into the year. Yeah. I mean, he did everything you could ask for. It's just, for some reason, they get down the goal line in the red zone. They're like, nah. We're not using Trey McBride here. We're using him everywhere else. Yeah, it's like, dude,
James Conner,
give this guy some target. He finally got a touchdown. I know Kyler Murray was calling for, like, we're going to get this guy a touchdown. It's like, good. It only took you a whole season to get him a touchdown. What's interesting is Bowers only had 4 touchdowns this year as well, too. It's that division. Like, neither one of those guys had a lot of touchdowns, so you could expect some positive regression for both of those guys moving forward. What it gives us is, like, it gives us these 2 really good young tight ends in good situations. It's going to progress. So, like, you have that at least bolstered the position as we lose Kelsey. Who knows what's happening with David Njoku? As much as I like him, there's a ton of risk with that. Or with Jonnu Smith, is that a 1-year blip, or do we get next year coming back with Jonnu Smith? Because we don't know what's going on with Tua. He wants to play, but they're not playing him. They're like, no, we're not going to play Tua. So you have all of these like tight ends and something. George Kittle is aging out, even though George Kittle just had the tight end one season. He's a monster. It's all good. So I think tight end to your position is just inherently like risky outside of those few guys. Because Sam Laporta, I wrote a lot of people's tight end one. We said we said he was not worth the price. Like I will say that, but he didn't significantly. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm glad you brought up Laporta because I wanted to ask you this question. Half PPR, where is Sam Laporta currently? Tight end what on the season?
That's a good question. I feel like he's still top 12, which speaks to the position and how bad it is. Points per game, I'll say he's like tight end 10.
I don't know points per game. I have overall season. Do you want to take another guess?
Sure. Tight end 8.
Really good guess. We say that you don't really want tight ends after tight end 6. Sam Laporta is the tight end 7 on the season. Currently only 663 yards and 53 receptions, which in years past has been a good tight end season, but those 7 touchdowns helped to prop him up. The problem was he was so boom bust simply because of all of the other weapons in that offense. The good thing is that he's in that offense and you just want pieces in that offense. So Sam Laporta going forward, I do not mind him. He's so young. He's going to grow. We'll have to see what happens with, Goff's going to be around for another few years at least. So that's nice. but we'll have to see what happens with this offense as it grows. David Montgomery is going to age out pretty soon. You got Gibbs there, but because they have Gibbs, do they really just dive in the next year, maybe 2 years down the line, just don't even go with another volume back in the vein of David Montgomery and just roll with Gibbs and lean into the passing game even more than they already do? Because if so, that could be interesting. I know they're probably one of the highest pass rate teams in the league
I don't know if they are.
since Montgomery's been out. That would be my guess.
Okay.
That would be my guess. So if that's the case, look, I know NFL teams want to run to win, but this is one of the few teams, Cincinnati, one of the few offenses that can pass to win. And I think they have the weapons to do it, inclusive of Sam Laporta.
Yeah, it's hilarious to me because if you look at him and Mark Andrews in Baltimore, they scored the exact same points per game, which is so funny because it was the exact same problem for both of these guys. Their usage was not great. We had Laporta doing kind of came on a little bit later than Andrews did. Andrews caught all those touchdowns in the middle of the season where it really boosted him. But it's hilarious that two of the guys that were the most hardest to predict week to week, they end up exactly 10.8 points per game, which is the Kyle Pitts number from his rookie year. For those of you who want to know scoring wise, that's where they finished and they got the touchdowns. Right, they got there. So thankfully they're in very good offense. You have Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, you have that offense with Todd Monken. Now I am curious your thoughts on the whole Ben Johnson thing because there is news coming out that I know it's not verified yet, but he's already basically said he's going to Jacksonville. Yep. So people should probably be dying Trevor Lawrence in Dynasty right now. What's your thought process with the whole Detroit Lions offense? Do you have concerns moving forward because Ben Johnson's such a focal point of that offense and everything he's orchestrated? Are you worried long term about the impact to say not necessarily Amon-Ra and Jahmyr Gibbs because they're special players, but the rest of the guys Laporta, James Williams, and those guys, and David Montgomery even as well?
Super good question. Will, we see your question. We'll get to it just after this one. So just give us 2 or 3 minutes here. But no, I'm not worried about it. I get it. Ben Johnson, one of the better coordinators in the league. Certainly nobody currently on that staff, certainly not Dan Campbell himself, is going to take over that mantle and call the plays. They need to figure it out and get in at least an adequate NFL play caller in the building. But no, I'm not worried. I think Jared Goff probably shouldn't be throwing as much as he is, but he has the weapons to do it. And what they're doing is they're playing Amon-Ra close to the vest. Jahmyr Gibbs is an animal out of the backfield. And because of that, the defense is forced to come up. And that's when you hit J-Mo over the top or on a slant where he can easily take it to the house because there's only one guy back there to beat. And then Sam Laporta is the forgotten man. So on plays where he's just left completely wide open. No. So the way that this offense is built with simply the personnel, it's perfect. So I'm not so worried about Ben Johnson leaving, which he will do. But I think they do it. It is contingent on who they bring into the building. If Shane Waldron gets hired by the Detroit Lions, I'm out on everybody. Forget it. We're on to 2026. But assuming we don't get an Adam Gase level guy in Detroit, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, I think that's key, right? You don't get a guy that everybody hates that no one wants to trust the offense. Dan Campbell knows what he's doing. He's put together a really good staff on both sides of the ball, offensive, defensive coordinator, right? They've built the whole program, everything, the vibes, everything is very good there right now. Yeah. I just wonder if how much it knocks off if you get a significantly worse coordinator or if someone that's just not as good. That's just, we're talking small niches in Dynasty. So that type of aspect, I'm obviously I think those guys are special players. Laporta, it's all price dependent, I think. Same thing with Andrews too. Yep. He's obviously a lot older. So you could probably get him for significantly less, I would assume, in Dynasty, but we'll see. You know, some people value those guys. So okay. For me, I just want to see what happens and who they bring in if they do lose Ben Johnson, which seems like he's going to go because this is the perfect time for him to do it, right? So if he doesn't go now, when would he leave? He didn't do it last year. He had chances. Good thing he avoided the Chicago situation. I'm assuming he doesn't want to do it again with Chicago because their ownership and the team people they have making the shots are just not very good. So yeah, for me, I think it's just an interesting way to look at it. But yeah, let's transition to Will's question. That's it on.
Yeah, let's do it.
So,
yep. So Will says, which QB would you start this week in week 18? Tyler Huntley, that is the Miami Dolphins, I believe. Jordan Love, of course, the Packers. Mac Jones on those Jacksonville Jaguars we were talking about. Josh Dobbs in San Francisco for the ship. I'm going to have to go to my rankings, but like, I don't really want to. I really hate this. And this is hence my hashtag QB Mageddon. It's ugly out here in these streets. And Jesse, I'll tell you right now, I don't really want it to be Jordan Love, but it might have to be.
I mean, you're probably going to have to go with Jordan Love. And I say this because I don't really trust Chicago's defense where it's at right now. Like, if they do not worry me at all. The whole thing with these backup quarterbacks, like Josh Dobbs, we've seen it. Tyler Huntley, we've seen it. Like, I don't want to do Tyler Huntley, man. Like, I don't trust Tyler Huntley at all. Josh Dobbs, he's the passer and all that fun stuff. But he terrifies me. Like, do you really want your ship on the line with one of those guys you're starting? Now, you can talk yourself into Mac Jones. You could do it.
Yes.
But, like, it's Indianapolis. It's kind of like a whatever matchup. Brian Thomas Jr., if he plays, which I think he's playing, he's going to go off. Like, he'll get his. I don't know about the rest of that team. So, I think I'm going to go Jordan Love unless we get information coming out that a few of these guys are going to sit, which I don't think they are because they're like they can kind of tinker with their seeding a little bit in the playoffs. So they're probably just going to play all their guys. So, yeah, I'm defaulting to Jordan Love here. If we don't do Jordan Love, is there anybody you prefer on that group of three besides Jordan Love?
Well, I have Mac Jones one spot ahead of Jordan Love this week, and it's simply because of the matchup. Chicago has been absolutely crushing it. I get there's nothing to play for, but really their defense has looked a lot better over the last couple of weeks. The secondary is finally healthy, or as healthy as it's going to be, and they're really picking it back up. But that Indy defense is also picking things back up. I'm really just banking here on the fact that Mac Jones has something to play for, and he's looking to be considered a viable NFL QB. We don't know where he's going to be next season. Chances are he's going to stay in Jacksonville. I assume he's locked up for at least another year. And so staying in Jacksonville, we know he's behind Trevor Lawrence. It's probably the best spot for him long term if they do in fact get Ben Johnson. But what at least Mac Jones wants to show people is that he can continue to have sustained success like he's had over the last couple of games. It hasn't been fantastic looking, but I will say that Jacksonville has looked decent. A lot of that is because of Brian Thomas Jr., who is the wide receiver 4 in fantasy football. But yeah, the Colts have just, aside from that ridiculous letting Drew Lock do whatever the hell he wants to them last week, that defense has looked better. But then again, Drew Lock did whatever the hell he wanted to this Colts defense last week. So, I'm going to go Mac Jones here over Jordan Love. Jordan Love has just been meh, and Josh Jacobs has been getting the rock in the red zone.
Yeah, like I think I'm not going to fight it just because like Mac Jones has been good for fantasy production since he's been playing. Obviously, they get in these situations where they're like, hey, guess what? Just air it out. Because, like, we got nothing else to play for, right? Like, let Brian Thomas go for his record. They get some Travis Etienne in the passing game. It's fine. Like, it's just they need to figure out the rest of those skill position players. Jacksonville, I will just say that because it's really – and, like, yeah, that's the guy I was going to talk about, Bryce Young. Like, Bryce Young's played really well. Now, he was under a ton of pressure, an insane amount of pressure last week against the Buccaneers. I don't think it's going to be that much pressure this week against Atlanta. Now, I know we've talked about this with Atlanta. They've kind of gotten better as the season is going on. But, like Bryce Young is the type of quarterback who I dare say can carry an offense. Like, that's kind of where I'm at with Bryce Young. I'm very solidified in him being a franchise quarterback, like what I've seen from him this year. Yes. Even last week, he played really well. Like, he did so much with so little. So, I don't mind going to Bryce Young if you want to go that. But, yeah, you talk about Mac Jones, that's fine. They're very similar in my rankings. Like, I look at it now. Mm-hmm. I have Bryce Young second right behind Jordan Love, and then Mac Jones, and then it's freaking Pastrana just because it's so hard to trust. And Arizona's out of the season. Like, they're not going to get into the playoffs, but they're going to play their guys. So, good luck to the Pastrana. I don't expect it to go very well for them at all.
Agree. I will say that I have Bryce Young ranked the highest of all of these quarterbacks. He's my QB 12. And the biggest reason why for me is, like you said, simply because he's playing so well and he has that rapport with Adam Thielen. Atlanta has really tightened up their defense over the last few weeks. However, since their bye in week 12, they only gave up 17 points to the Chargers. They, of course, gave up 42 points to the Vikings because the Vikings have been on a tear, but then just 9 points to Vegas in a win, just 7 points to those Giants that we were talking about, blew out the Colts defense. in a win there. And then they damn near beat the Washington Commanders, who they only gave up 24 points to them in regulation time. So, and then it ended up being 30 in the overtime. So, what I will say is that these Falcons have been playing a lot better. But the thing is that, they need to win this game, but Michael Penix is not really doing it. So I think that Carolina will have what I'm doing right now is as I'm talking myself out of Bryce Young simply because Chuba Hubbard is out. Is it going to be Miles Sanders? I think it's going to be Miles Sanders.
It's going to be Blackshear, Boone, Sanders. It's going to be a motley crew of guys you don't want to play. I will just say that.
Yeah. I'll go Bryce. I'll go Bryce, but it's really close for me now. I'm going to move him down. He's going to be not my QB 12. He's going to be my QB 14. I'm going to have Mac Jones at 15 and Jordan Love at 16. So you know what the answer is, Will? I don't know. But I'm going to go with Bryce Young.
Yeah. Like, as weird as it says to your point, like I just feel safer with Bryce Young than Jordan Love. Like that shows you like how much faith and development he's shown in year 2 since he's been benched. He's come back.
True.
Unlike Anthony Richardson, like that seems a lot more stable for him at quarterback. With Richardson, like I don't know what's going on in Indianapolis. Yeah. Speaking of that Colts defense with DeForest Buckner coming out, like they said they had to talk to Richardson on the side. They're like, listen, you're not doing your part. Like we need you to play better. And he's probably thinking to himself like, yeah, dude, I'm trying. And they're just like, it's not working, man. You got to figure it out. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, like. Sorry, Will. This is a long-winded way of talking our way into this 8,000 times, right? I'll say Bryce Young. Like I feel better about him. So like after talking you through, it's good. So yeah, if you want to go Bryce Young, if you want any of those guys, though, like if news comes out and it changes, like you want to go that way, go that way. It's like I don't think any of these guys are winning you the week. I'll just say that.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Thoughts on sitting Saquon? So first of all, that's rough on Taylor. I did not have Jonathan Taylor only being viable in the fantasy playoffs on my bingo card. But goddamn, the RB1 in the fantasy playoffs, totally ridiculous. It should have been Saquon. Saquon's also been pretty good for you. Not in that first round of the playoffs, but in the next 2 for sure. The question here is, what do we think, Jesse, about the Eagles sitting Saquon this week? And spoiler alert, I think it sucks.
It's weird how people have such issue with this. It's like
I have a big issue.
My whole thought process is like, is it really worth chasing the record if you could say like, because their season is pretty much locked up. They're not like, there's no competition for them. Obviously they could still get the 1 seed if it magically happens that way, but it's going to be very tough for them to do it. So like, I get why they're resting Saquon. They have no real reason to play him. The whole thing is like, what happens if he gets injured? People are going to lose their goddamn minds.
True.
They will be like out in Philadelphia with pitchforks, and they will be chanting for freaking Sirianni's like head on a pike. Like they're gonna be like, yeah, no, if this is Madden, I'm 100% playing Saquon. I'm gonna play that man.
Let him play.
Saquon said he wants to play too. Like that's the thing on top of it. But Sirianni's like, dude, we don't need you to play. We're trying to get a Super Bowl here. The best thing is to keep you healthy. We don't want you to tweak your hamstring. Then in like 2 weeks from now, you're like limping. You're not the player you are, because it's a massive drop off from the number 2. Like Will Shipley, Kenneth Gainwell, any one of those guys back there, they're nowhere close to Saquon. Saquon's raised the floor of this offense. Now they've leaned into it a little bit too much with Saquon because he was pushing over 400 touches, and I'm like, bro, we don't got to do all these goddamn touches. Like let's take it easy. But in the playoffs, they're going to run Saquon through the ground. So like, give him a week, and then let them see how week 1 goes in the playoffs. Like you get him there. So I don't mind it. I understand. Like if I was a Philly fan, of course I don't want him to play. I don't want him to set the record because like say you guys don't win the Super Bowl, you'll have the record season, right? But like. If you step back and look at it, I'm fine with them benching him. I know it sucks. It sucks for us fantasy football managers in week 18 because Saquon's been like the RB1 and he's clearly above everybody else by a few points per game too. So he's been that good. So yes, I understand the whole thought process, but my thought process is like it's fine. You can bench him. It's not going to kill you. You'll be happy you have him rested up for the next week. So that's where I come out on it.
Yeah, and I totally get it from the coaching staff. But what about the way it's lined up, Jesse, for Saquon Barkley? Saquon Barkley has put his ass on the line for this team, and now this team is not going to allow him to break the all-time rushing record against his old team. Are they in New York, Jesse? No, they're in Philly, but it's still, he wants it on some level, and if they said, Saquon, it's up to you, that would not be an easy decision for him to make. So I've heard it both ways. I've heard, he really wants to do this against his team. I've heard earlier in the season, he doesn't really care about records and accolades. And I get that too. But it's a fun thing for the league. It's a fun thing for the player. And if a player's going to get hurt, a player's going to get hurt, right? What's to say that the Giants are going to take him out versus whoever they play in the first round of the playoffs? So I get it. You want him healthy for the playoffs, but the Eagles have already been overusing him. Jesse, if you had to guess how many rushing attempts Saquon Barkley has on the season through 17 games, what would be your guess?
I think he's already set a career high in rushing attempts, like by a good amount.
Probably.
I don't know what the total is. I don't know what the total is, but I know he cleared 300 a couple of weeks ago. So, like,
he did.
I would say he's at least 330, if not 340, 350 in that range.
Yep. 345 rushing attempts. Jesse, any guess what? You don't even have to give me the player, but what second place has in terms of rushing attempts on the season? What number?
Oh, like the guy. Well, is it Henry?
Henry's 3, actually.
Is it Jacobs? That's 2 then?
It's neither. Jacobs is 4.
What? Who's 2? I'm blanking on it. I should know this. I don't know. I'm thinking like
you shouldn't, because it makes sense. Once you hear it, it's going to make sense.
It will.
But give me the number first. I'll give it to you. Give me the number. More than Henry.
I'll say, does anybody else have 300 rushing attempts in the season? I think Henry does, right? So I'll say 322. Just around
316. Henry has 305. Jacobs 295. Kyren Williams has 316 rush attempts on the season. Ridiculous amount of usage. But of course, this is what Sean McVay does to his RB1. So, that's the thing, right? Saquon Barkley 345 on the season. He's absolutely being run into the ground, but he can handle this, right? He's built for this. He's done it his entire season behind a terrible offensive line and bad offense. And now he's behind a great offensive line in a great offense. And we see that that's, leading to production. So he's built to handle this load. We always knew he was built to handle this load. You've been doing it all season. Just give him one more game. Give him a half. Give him a half to get the 100 yards. He can do it against the Giants. Come on.
I get it. I'm just like thinking, like, you know what? Like, sometimes you gotta protect the player from themselves. A lot of times you have to do that. And like, you have to do that. Like, that's your job as a head coach. Don't get Saquon hurt. Like, just let him. If he gets hurt when he's playing in the playoffs, that's one thing, right? Let him play.
Let's move on. Gabriel's got another one. Oh, Jesse, you know where I stand, so you can let me know if you want me to rail about Sam McDarnold. Sam Darnold for 5 minutes. All right, listen.
Sam McDarnold.
Here's what needs that. So first of all, here's the real question, Gabriel, about the Vikings. They're 14-2. They're a massive favorite, obviously, in the NFC. They have the potential here to be 15-2, and if they are, they get the number 1 seed and a bye. This is a massive game for the Sam Darnold legacy and whatever the Minnesota Vikings are going to be in the playoffs this year. Does it mean that they're going to beat the Detroit Lions if they face them in the playoffs? No. Does it mean, if they win this week, does it mean that they're going to be able to take on the Eagles and Saquon Barkley or Tampa Bay or a rising team in the NFC? No. But he's got a damn good chance. If Sam Darnold can win a playoff game, I think he's locked in. That this game is a big game, but even if he loses this game, if he wins 1 playoff game, he's pretty much locked into Minnesota. If he wins 2 playoff games, if he has to, or 3, depending on what he needs to do to get to the Super Bowl, if Sam Darnold gets to the Super Bowl, he is going to be the biggest thing in Minnesota, and they will not be allowed by their fan base to let him go. Because everyone is going to be seeing Lombardi, whether he wins it or not, going to the Super Bowl. So a lot rides. Sam Darnold's future really rides on these next 3 weeks, I'd say, depending if he wins or loses this week. And then we'll see. But just to wrap it up, with Sam Darnold, I think he should stay in Minnesota. I think he's proven enough. Is he the caliber quarterback that can take them to the Super Bowl and win? Is he, and this is the same questions we have about Jared Goff, right? I don't know, but Is JJ McCarthy that guy? I don't think we know. And even if Sam Darnold comes back and JJ McCarthy comes out and beats him in camp, well, great. Now we have a good problem, right? Now we're paying our quarterback too much. But if JJ McCarthy leads us, and then and then we can trade him trade Sam Darnold in the offseason, great. So I think it's a good problem to have. It sucks you got to pay your quarterback that much. But Sam Darnold deserves a contract. I think you should stay in Minnesota, and I think you should probably try and trade JJ. Although the smart money, like Gabriel was saying, is just let him sit for a couple of years, let him rot on the bench. He can learn and then take over. So I think Sam Darnold should stay on the Vikings. McCarthy, trade him or keep him. Who cares? But the Vikings are there, and they don't need JJ. What do you think?
Well, the interesting thing with the Vikings is they have, like, at this point in time, if you look at salary caps for 2025, they have the 5th most cap space of any NFL team. So, like, they have that amount of money. Now, if you tag Sam Darnold, that's $40 million straight up, just gone. So that takes the majority of all the money you could put into other positions. And I think it really comes down, like, with KOC you have in place. You're like, if I could do this with Darnold, man, I could definitely do this with McCarthy, right? So if I'm the GM, I'm like, do we really need to pay Darnold? Like, do we need to do it? Like, let's just let's go with McCarthy. Or on the flip side, like you're saying, if they do want to do the Darnold thing, then you trade McCarthy. Like, I don't want to go in with both these guys because you're going to create problems. There's going to be issues. They're going to chant for freaking McCarthy at some point when Darnold struggles. Or if you're starting McCarthy and then he struggles, they're going to be like, dude, put the guy that won us the Super Bowl back there, right? Like, so it really leaves you in this weird position. And we always say, like, you should always have multiple quarterbacks, but, like, the negative impact on the locker room, like, is always something we don't ever focus on because, like, it could tear apart your locker room, right? We've seen this in, like, Philadelphia with Carson Wentz, like, and they had to, like, basically just get rid of him for the Jalen Hurts stuff because they're like, oh, yeah, we still have Carson Wentz. It's like, no. And they did this previously with Carson Wentz before that with what's his name, the guy Nick Foles, right? Nick Foles won in the Super Bowl with him. They're like, yeah, we got to bring Nick Foles back, and they're like, we really don't need to bring Nick Foles back. He's not that good. But so like, you kind of have to make a decision as a team which way you want to go with this, and they're like, their GM's one of the better ones at, like, building, like, finding talent and scouting. So, like, if you want to trade him, like, get a first plus for JJ McCarthy, and you could use that other positions, like, you could make that work. I just think you're investing a ton of money into the quarterback position. And like, this is the window you kind of have to, like, maximize with the rest of the talent because it's a really good roster, right? So it's a really good team. So my thought process would be just let Darnold walk. You get some comp picks and go from there. But yeah, if they decide they want to sign him, then you move on from McCarthy. It's gonna be fascinating.
I mean, it's interesting to think about. Let's pretend JJ McCarthy is a very good NFL quarterback, right? Out of the gate. In his first season as starter, is he more likely to win a Super Bowl than Sam Darnold? I would say probably not. And then, you're talking about windows. I get it from a cap perspective because you're 100% right. You want that rookie quarterback contract so you can build the rest of the team. But also, to your point, the rest of the team is practically built. And so because of that, the last piece is quarterback. And JJ McCarthy probably won't get to a Sam Darnold level until year 2 or 3 of him starting. And by that point, his rookie contract is over. So I think Sam Darnold makes the most sense. Let's also remember that Daniel Jones is on this team. Daniel Jones is a Minnesota Viking, which means he's a serviceable quarterback too, right? So that kind of gives you flexibility to send away JJ McCarthy. You send him to a team and you say, if you decide to roll with Sam Darnold and you say to that team, he's on his rookie contract. You have what you needed. I need a first round plus because we spent, pick number 12, 11, 10 on him, whatever it was. And he's going to be your long-term future. This kid is good. We just ran into the Sam Darnold. This is like the most positive outcome of whatever the Brock Purdy, Trey Lance situation was a couple of years ago, where, like, both quarterbacks could actually be good. So I think their best play is to roll with Darnold because of the window that exists. Go get a haul for JJ and use that to build around Sam Darnold. Get yourself, you already have Darisaw, who will come back. That's the thing. They're doing this without their best player who has been on IR in Christian Darisaw, their left tackle. Go get yourself a right tackle. Go get you already have Cam Robinson. Maybe he just moves over to right. Go get yourself a guard or a center, because you don't need any other weapons. Go get yourself a legitimate running back in this draft. And you don't need to use a first round pick on him, and go get yourself a lockdown corner. There's very few holes on this team that exist, and I think they can fill them better by Sam Darnold, Game Manager Plus, and then JJ just moving on to another team.
Well, yeah, like this gets in the Brian Flores thing where like a lot of people didn't like that defense. Like they moved on from Daniel Hunter, they brought on some guys. One of the guys I'm like, think's been a massive hit for them in the line. But like the fact that Brian Flores, if he moves on, right, like you don't have this guy that's orchestrating one of the best defenses in the NFL. That's a constant change. So they more than likely need to bring back Brian Flores. Put out the rumors of like, you see what he did to Tua in Miami? The guy's not a head coach. You can't have him be a head coach. Yeah. And then he stays as your DC for a few years. kind of what Reed's done with Spagnuolo in Kansas City. Like they've kept him there for years, which has had that defense playing at a very high level for the past like 5 years, pretty much. If you can keep Flores in town, then you have KLC doing the offense and all that stuff. Like you have that connective tissue another year or two to prolong this defense, because we see how defenses shuffle and change each year, right? So the high-minded, which Flores clearly is, like he knows what the heck he's doing defensively, no matter what you want to say of this person. He's got the thing locked down. So yeah, it's just, I mean, we could talk about this forever. Like we could go back and forth and be like, you got to make this. So I think depending on where they go with this, it's going to give us an idea of how they go about it, and then we'll see from there. But I don't think and also we have to know about J.J. McCarthy's injury. He went back in for surgery a second time. Like he had to get that cleared up. So maybe that's the other thing. If they're worried about it, then you just sign Darnold. Like you just make it real easy. If you don't think J.J. McCarthy's going to be ready next year, you sign Darnold and you just go on from there. And then when J.J. McCarthy's ready and you want to give him the range, you can win another year. Like it's just, you don't have to force it if you're worried. Like they have good ways of a lot of outs. I guess I would phrase it this way.
Yeah. Totally agree with you. We have been talking about it forever, so let's move on to defenses. Jesse, I have my Eagles, or I have the Eagles, not my Eagles, as my number 4 overall defense this week. I have the Ravens against Bailey Zappi, most likely in Cleveland. Yep. They're my number 1. Tampa against Spencer Rattler, just confirmed. They're my number 2. The Chargers against Vegas and probably Aiden O'Connell. They're my number 3. And then the Eagles, followed by Green Bay to round out my top 5 against Caleb Williams and Chicago. Do you stream the Eagles defense, and is there another defense that you like this week?
Yeah, it depends how far down the list you want to go. Like you could do the Eagles this week. I do worry a little bit because they're bench players like that. That's the concern with that defense. It's not gonna be but like if you can at all get Baltimore's defense, it's like I think the Cleveland's projected for 11 points this week. 11 points. Like it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a nightmare. So they're clearly the one. I don't expect them to be available because they're rostered in most leagues. But yeah, if you could do, I think the Eagles are a good one. I mean, as much as we talk about it, like I don't mind the Arizona Cardinals going up against San Francisco and all the issues they have eventually, like Purdy's not playing and all that stuff. Like it gets interesting. You could do the Seahawks because Darnold's Stafford's not playing. So they just talked about Stafford's not going to play. You could do that against Stafford, and there's just so many QBs in flux this week. You want to target one of those offenses that has basically backup quarterback play. There's about 10 of them this week, so you could pick and choose which one you want to do.
Question: who is the quarterback in Indy? Because I think Flacco and Richardson are both out. Is that correct?
I am not 100% sure on that. Give me 1 second. I will find out who it is.
I'm pretty sure Richardson is definitely out. I think I just saw that. I thought I saw Flacco might be out. So
he started. Fancy Pros an hour ago said he's playing. So I'll tell you who the backup, Stafford's backup is. Do you have any clue who that is?
Stafford's backup? I do. It's Jimmy G.
Yes, sir. Let's go. Mr. Hospital Ball. Those you remember his time in San Francisco. Yeah. He's not afraid to get his wide receivers laid out. So we could see a few of that this week.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is Jalen Hurts is officially out. That should come as no surprise to anyone. But yeah, the Eagles are going to be resting majority of their offense. The Giants, therefore, could be a decent play. Their defense gave up a ton to Flacco last week. But, why not? Why not give it a shot with Kenny Pickett? Kenny Pickett is still bad.
Yeah. And then another team I would say is the Chargers. They get Vegas. And Vegas is just a disaster right now. So if they're available, there'd be another team I don't mind streaming as well. So you got a lot of good options this week. It might not seem like it, but there's depth for defenses you can definitely play.
Totally good. Weird Al Slapovich, love the name, says week 2 of the championship got Lamar but lost Josh Allen. So Mac Jones or Dobbs? It's clearly Dobbs for me. Clearly Mac for me.
I was like, wait, it
Mac
is?
Jones. No. It's Mac Jones.
We spent all this time hopping on that. Yeah. I don't want to do the Josh Dobbs thing. Now he does give you a rushing. I will give you that rushing, but when it's such bad quarterback play on I know he had like the 2 weeks in Minnesota when he came out of nowhere, and he was like, they played the Creed Take Me Higher stuff, and I was like, this is legendary. I love it. Then it fell off a cliff. You don't want to do the Dobbs thing on a game where it could just fall off a cliff. So yeah, we've seen Mac Jones. He's able to orchestrating a competent NFL offense. You could take that. With Dobbs, you have no idea how this is going to go. It roll 8 different ways. There's a ton of risk starting him. You have Lamar, so you already have an edge, right? And then like this is your super flex second spot, right? So I'm fine going Jones. It's safer. The ceiling feels similar between the two of them, honestly. So I would go Mac Jones.
Yep, totally agree. If I had a nickel for every time a Jets QB resurfaced after being traded, I have one nickel, but it's historical that it happened. Yeah. Hey, let's not forget Geno Smith, starting quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks. Let's not forget Mark Sanchez was a guy who started elsewhere a couple of games here and there. He was in Tampa for a bit. So, but yes, I agree. Sam Darnold and, of course, Geno Smith. It was a long time ago, but he was a Jet. Hysterical, historical. It's both.
It's hilariously accurate, is what it is.
Yeah.
There's a picture a couple years ago of Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold in Carolina Panthers uniform, and these guys are like top 5 in the NFL passing yards. It's just like this was like 2 or 3 years ago. It wasn't even that long ago. They both were just backups on that team, and it's like, oh, look how it's turned out. Carolina's just giving everybody franchise quarterback. So if they move on from a backup quarterback, you might as well pick one up from Carolina, see if it works out. Because at this point, you can't go wrong.
I mean, unbelievable that the Aaron Rodgers experiment didn't work. And I say that honestly now. I say that honestly. I am shocked because this team was in place with its coaching staff intact at the beginning of the season to do great things. And one thing led to another. Aaron Rodgers just meddles too much, I think. And yeah, he's unhappy.
Yes.
He's unhappy, but he's blaming everyone except himself. So
I'm shocked.
That's a recipe for disaster. And the Jets have no one to blame but themselves.
I saw someone was like trying to do a poll of who's the better all-time quarterback, and it was like Rodgers versus Favre, and I was like, all right, we've gone too far. Stop this. Brett Favre leads the NFL in career interceptions. Doesn't know how to read a defense half the time. I was like, stop. Aaron Rodgers was better than Brett Favre. Okay, can we move on past it? Doesn't mean nobody like. I don't like Aaron Rodgers. He's he's whatever, but like quarterback-wise, at his peak, he was phenomenal. It's just the time has come. Wave the white flag. Go off to the sunset. Go off to do your ayahuasca, wherever you're going. Just go in the darkness for retreat and just go. Don't come back, Rodgers. We don't need you playing quarterback anymore.
Although, wouldn't it be hilarious, Jesse, if like everyone seems to be manifesting, if Aaron Rodgers went the Brett Favre route and went to Minnesota, which would be the dumbest move for Minnesota, by the way, of all of their options, and tried to win a championship with them. Minnesota, do not do this. Don't do it.
Terrible idea. You just do Darnold. You don't need to do this. Is like Darnold, but you get all these crazy demands on top of it. It's like, hey, guess what? I'm a worse quarterback. Also, I need you to give me this guy. You need to fly this person out. I need a masseuse this time. I need this. Like, all right, man, just like let me control the offense too. I'm like, yeah, how's that working for you? Let's go well. I mean, it sucks for my guy Roger or Devontae Adams. I'm gonna be sad when he's not gonna catch passes for Rodgers, but it is what it is.
Yeah. We'll see if he stays. I mean, there's been reports of Adams being let go as well. I don't know if they're going to trade him, what the hell they're going to do with him.
His contract's
but we'll see. Yeah, that's a conversation for another time. We'll see. But let's do this, and let's see if I can quickly get everything looking nice. Since we have about 5 minutes or so left, let's talk about, do we have it? Yes, almost. Let's talk a little bit about some of these rankings here. And these are dynasty wide receiver rankings brought up by Keep Trade Cut. So this is just one resource. You see Jamar Chase is at the top. No surprise there. Malik Neighbors, Jesse. Malik Neighbors, wide receiver 3. Holy crap.
I'm just going to trade out of Brian Thomas Jr. Give me a plus. We'll call it a day, folks. I don't know why there's a gap between this. Also, why is Malik Neighbors ahead of Puka Nacua? Puka Nacua is having the freaking monster season. And like, oh, guess what? He's just not sexy. I'm like, I don't care. Puka Nacua is going to outproduce Malik Neighbors next year. Stop doing this with Puka, man. Like, y'all are crazy.
Yeah, but we were having a debate here. So this is, let's start with, we'll leave Brian Thomas Jr. here. But from after wide receiver 6, who I think we agree, Jesse. Maybe Jesse doesn't agree because maybe Brian Thomas is above Neighbors. We'll see. But I pretty much agree with the top 6, not necessarily in that order. But let's go from wide receiver 7 here. Let's assume Brian Thomas is here. You also see where those first round picks fall in as well. And you can see all the way to the bottom to T. Higgins. How are you feeling about this group of wide receivers, and what are you thinking about, for example, A.J. Brown being going to be 28 years old when we get into the season next year, Drake London, who did not have the season that we were expecting. Garrett Wilson obviously didn't have the season we were expecting, but then Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr. going nuts. T. Higgins going absolutely nuts and deserving of a wide receiver one contract somewhere. What are you thinking here about these wide receivers in terms of their dynasty value and where it's probably all going to shake out this offseason?
Yeah, because like you have JSN, who was your guy clearly before. He outscored both Garrett Wilson and Drake London. Like he had that monster season. Lad McConkey, 15 points a game. He's right there with Drake London. Like when you get into this, the guys that year one show you what they did, and I know people will talk about that offense or whatever, but like when these guys that show out in year one, like they did, you should put them above because that gives you a super high floor, and that means the ceiling is even higher. And Fantasy Points, who I'll keep hyping them up, they just put out a tweet of like top yards per hour run outside. Lad McConkey's third in the NFL outside, not inside of the slot, outside. He's fucking stud. So what happens when the offense kicks it up and they improve the targets? He can get up to 150 targets next year. Like he could do that. And so, yeah, your point with and the whole Marvin Harrison Jr. thing, like this is just people just holding on to what they were as a prospect. Like he was fine, but like why were we putting him over all these other guys? Like we needed to bump him down. Like like T. Higgins just had a monster, almost 20 points per game season, and he's below Rashee Rice. Don't know why that is. But yeah, like it's the Garrett Wilson, the Drake London need to come down. Lad McConkey needs to go up with the Brian Thomas Jr. And like in that range, and then Jackson Smith and Jigga needs to be up there, I would say. How do you kind of view all of these guys where you're talking about them? Is that how you view them, or you have it differently?
Yeah, I think BTJ and Nico are right where they should be. I would probably, I don't know if I would flip flop Nico ahead of BTJ, but they're both right there. You can't argue them. I think Neighbors is probably right there too as wide receiver 6. He's a little high for me. But then JSN at 9 feels a little heavy. I love JSN. As we discussed, he's been a biggest buy in the offseason. He's a stud. He's young. But the usage might not continue. They might replace Tyler Lockett. They might have 2 healthy backs who they decide to rotate more and go with a more run-heavy script. And that defense has to get better in the offseason. So I don't love him at wide receiver 9, really, because even though he's operating as the wide receiver 1, there's no guarantee that week to week he's going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team because DK was operating as that earlier in the season. I get things change. I get you decide that, and you might have more insight into this as a Hawks fan than I do, but I get you decide over the course of a season how players are running and who should be the focal point. And Jason absolutely took control of that. But DK was dealing with injury. JSN didn't take over until DK went out. So I think that's a really interesting situation. Is JSN the clear-cut 1? I would say no. He's a 1A. But then also Marvin Harrison, is he a clear-cut 1? And I would say no. Trey McBride clearly has more receptions. I believe he has more targets than Marvin Harrison. He must. So it's really interesting the way that these 2 players are so far up boards. I would be more than happy kind of trading out of them to get to, like you said, a Lad McConkey, a Drake London. Garrett Wilson is also in a place that I don't love. I love the player. I just don't know what the hell is going to go on with his situation. So I would bump him down a few spots with A.J. Brown, with some of these guys, and I'd probably bump up Lad. Drake is probably fine there. But then the rest of these guys, Jesse, do you feel comfortable bumping any of these guys up into that top tier? Chris Olave seems low to me. Devonta Smith seems low to me, even though he's a 2. How are you feeling about this group? And would you bump anyone here? There's DK, there's JMO, there's Waddle. How do you feel about this group? And would you bump any of these guys up into that, top 15 range?
I mean, Addison's super safe. I will say that there's no competition for him, and that offense is going to be cooking. True. So I know people were worried about him this offseason. He's balled out. He's been really good. And I will say, if you want to shoot a ceiling shot, it's Pickens. Like, it's clearly Pickens up this group. Because Pickens has been phenomenal in his situation. Now, you might think he's going to get stuck with Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith. Maybe that happens. But what happens if they change it and gets better quarterback, or they just let Russell Wilson throw it more with Pickens? Because his EPA in that offense he's been the one person that offense single-handedly done that for them. So, yeah, I think those are the guys you take the shots on. But to your point, the Rome Odunze, like the hype for Rome Odunze is going to kick in at some point. There's going to be a push for him in dynasty. So he's just by default, because he's young and he's such a high prospect, like he's going to move above. Like I don't know why we're doing Zay Flowers is fine there. It's kind of whatever. Chris Olave, like he's kind of like what we're talking about with Roman Nunez. You just need to get better for Chris Olave because he showed you like a decent amount, but and then you get to the old guys like Metcalf, which old. He's not old, but like he's not in the young age anymore in Dynasty, so he kind of falls here unless he's an elite producer. Like you're comparing Metcalf to T. Higgins, just take the guy that's giving you the elite production of T. Higgins, right? So I think that's why T. Higgins should jump up into like the borderline range with AJ Brown. But
totally
like
agree.
The rest of the guys in this range, like Rashee Rice, we don't know when he's coming back. I think he's probably going to get pushed down the closer we get to the season until we get information on him. So I think he's going to be a buy later in the year, just be how the market's going to treat him. But like, do you really want to spend top 12 price on Garrett Wilson or Drake London? I would just rather go get Ladd McConkey, enjoy that insulation he has for this year.
Agreed.
He proves it. I mean, like theoretically, you should be doing everything you can to pay up for the Brian Thomas of the world, because those are the guys that give you a chance to get into the elite tier 1. Because if he has another elite season like this year, he does it again, he's going to be a tier 1 asset. So like, you always want to go after the elite of the elites. Brian Thomas is, and this is like, I guess Nico, but he's a little bit older. Like Puka and Brian Thomas are the ones that fall down of this group. So target those guys if you're going to chase the elite guys and get that. Like that's how I would go do about it. And then if you're on a contending team, just go get AJ Brown for cheaper. Yeah,
and I totally agree with your point. But if you look at these guys, Amon-Ra, we talked about the issues with Ben Johnson leaving. What does that mean for Amon-Ra's target volume? Because he's the clear-cut one. Does it get more spread around? Do they change the offense significantly to where Goff is looking a little bit more downfield or looking to the tight end a little bit more? I think that's unlikely, but it certainly is possible, as opposed to Ben Johnson sticking around, which he will not do. CeeDee Lamb, do they bring in competition? Does someone like T. Higgins go to Dallas? Right. And if that's the case, then we have a similar situation. It doesn't necessarily affect T. Higgins in Cincinnati, but Dak Prescott is not Joe Burrow, never was Joe Burrow. He's developed into a good NFL quarterback, but that line hasn't been as great as a pass blocking unit as it had in the past. So that's really the concern there. And they need other weapons. So these guys can drop down a little bit. And I could see Brian Thomas jumping up. And of course, these guys are going to be damn near 26 when the season starts. Brian Thomas Jr. just going into his second season and ascending. So it's an interesting discussion for sure, and something that we're going to monitor because as we know, as I think you guys should know, certainly wide receiver is the most, I guess, the safest asset. I'll put it that way in unless we're talking about super flex leagues in which you have, a high-end quarterback. Wide receiver, and a lot of these wide receivers, up to wide receiver 20, really are pretty safe assets. A guy like Jaden Waddle was wide receiver 6 maybe 2 years ago. But even though he's fluctuated, he's only at like wide receiver 18 now, according to this market. And then, of course, Tyreek Hill retires or gets injured because he's older. Or, simply just, Jalen Waddle is healthy and is featured a little bit more. And Jonnu regresses a little bit because he's older. Jalen Waddle's there for the long term, and he could very easily be in the top 10 this point next year. So there are guys in that up to wide receiver 20 who feel safe enough. Devonta Smith is another one who these are great players who are in good situations, and they have the opportunity to jump up if their production can match their situation.
Oh, 100%. And like if you really are looking for cheap production, just go target the like Jacoby Myers of the world. These guys that are consistent producers, they're not going to give you top 12 wide receiver seasons, but they're not valued anything close to that, right? So you just go down the list. I think Xavier Worthy's probably an interesting buy for the young players because he's wide receiver, what is that, 27?
27.
So like, So like you get, you kind of know what you're looking for. If you want to continue, just keep going down the list. You're going to find guys at wide receiver 50 that are valuable and will outproduce a ton of these guys.
Jerry Jeudy.
Judy's I saw David Gautier and like he put out a tweet like all the wide receivers that got 1,000 yards this year were top 12. Judy's the only guy outside the top 12 that put up 1,000 yards. Insane. Now there's a whole bunch of his situation that's terrible, but he had that good season. He's wide receiver 35. So if you want a cheaper younger player, he's only 25. Like you could do that with him, right? And like we talked about with Cortland Sutton, it's all about what you want to buy. And
he did it with DTR, right? He did it with that one game with DTR as well. So, like, he can do it. Maybe Bailey Zappi targets him 15 times. We'll have to see what happens. We're going to wrap the show, but first we'll get to Weird AI's question. Appreciate you. No problem. A quick running back rank for this week. Yuck, double yuck. Let's have a quick look. I'm guessing it's going to be Corum.
It's got to be.
I don't know. Is Kyron playing?
No, I think he's sitting. I think he's sitting this week. So
that's smart.
What if he's sitting? Then you just play Corum. because the guys behind him are just atrocious. So this is where we talk about this high priority handcuff. This is why we've pounded the table for Blake Corum. At least I have in waiver wire articles. Obviously, it took till week 18 to get here, which sucks, but finally happening. Like, he's going to get 20-plus opportunities in this game.
Yeah.
So if you have that from running back, and I know we talked about Jimmy Garoppolo throwing hospital balls, at least he can give you some production offensively, right? So I think it's Super Dave. If Cook sits, which I think he is going to sit, Ray Davis becomes interesting, right? But there's no Josh Allen this week, so it gets risky with a ton of these guys. And Herbert, we just don't know how much he's going to get you. So I wouldn't do Herbert. I think Carter and Corum are the safer of the two options. Like, I like those guys, and I like Davis and Herbert. So if you're deciding between Carter and Corum, who would you pick, Jim?
I don't have Carter ranked nearly that high. And I think it's because DJ Dallas has seen a lot of run, especially in the passing game, when those other two guys are out, right? When Benson's not playing and when Connor's out. So, which is the case this week. So Michael Carter, I only have at RB 38, but I have DJ Dallas at RB 43. So these guys are super neck and neck. I expect them to split. And that's why I'm not as high on them. I will say Ray Davis, I do expect James Cook to sit. In that case, he's my RB 26, but I have Blake Corum as my RB 23. So it's going to be Corum for me. Herbert, I get it if Brown is out. Look, here's the thing. If Brown is out, that's really interesting. The problem is they're playing Pittsburgh, but we know that Cincinnati wants to ball out, right? So facing Pittsburgh on the ground with a less than ideal running back talent, I don't want to play that game. But I will have him ranked, that's Khalil Herbert, a lot higher than I want to have him ranked. That being said, I cannot play him over Corum. So I'm going to go Blake Corum here, assuming he's the only guy in the backfield.
Yeah, like we saw Carter step in. He had 13 carries, two receptions on last week, like over 70 yards. He was fine. So, like, I think he's just a lot safer than we get to Davis and Herbert. So if you can't do Corum, then I would do Carter. I think that's fine.
Yep. DJ Dallas, I'm just checking out what he did. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But last week, not great. And just one target in each of those games. But 3 weeks ago, against New England, he did pretty well. The thing is that Ray Davis is playing against New England. New England clearly wants to lose this game. Drake May is playing. So that's really interesting. If Cook sits, I will have a debate with myself between Ray Davis and Blake Corum. But like you said, there's no Josh Allen. They're probably going to rest an offensive lineman or two if they can get away with it. And certainly that defense. So I'll still go with Blake Corum. I think he's safer.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can do enough with Garoppolo where Corum's going to get the work, and Seahawks defense has been kind of all over the place. So I think they'll be able to at least move down the field. If you can't get Corum, just go Carter. I think Carter's a nice fallback option for you.
Yep, totally agree with you. All right, so do you want to sign us out? Let's get out of here. It's after an hour, and I am ready to go.
Shocker.
Home.
Yeah, we always go a little bit long on the show. That's what we do. So we're not going to have any show tomorrow. I'll do a sit start show on Sunday. So those of you that want to come join me, I don't know if Jeremy's going to join me. He might not. But I'll do it for the love of the game, for the love of the people. So we'll have it on there. But just make sure you guys follow us on all the social media platforms. It's at the FF Universe. So follow us on those accounts. We very much appreciate it on our goal towards 1,000 subs on YouTube. But that's going to wrap it up. And then we're going to do a bunch of content in the off season. So look forward to it. We'll be doing just a ton of live shows, a ton of recorded videos, shorts, all that fun stuff. Jeremy's your guy for shorts. He does a great job with those. So give him a follow. He's going to be working on some fun projects too for people that we'll tease a little bit. I'm not going to say it, but there's fun stuff he has cooking in the batch, I will say.
We'll talk a little bit about that, not just yet, but I do want to remind everybody that next Saturday, so a week from tomorrow, we're going to be having our awards show for the fantasy season. So tune into that, and that'll be on all socials as well. And we'll probably be with you certainly for a couple of rounds of the fantasy playoffs. We don't do DFS because we cannot. I'm in Amsterdam. That's a no. Jesse's over in Washington State. That's a no. And I think SC in Oregon's also no, and then Aaron in Canada. So none of us have that DFS capability. Yeah. So otherwise we would be, and personally I would be pumping a bunch of lost money probably into that platform. But we have lots of ways around that too, and we'll be getting into that in the off season and next year.
100%. So I think that's going to wrap it up. We're going to get out of here. So, y'all have a good week. Good luck with Star Sits. And, I'll see you on Sunday if you enjoy. So, take care, folks.